Hello everyone, this is Timothy Mark with Alexandria.
How's everybody doing today?
And we are the Tickle Trunk of Horrors. We have a website, tickletrunkofhorrors.com. Although I'm probably going to end up putting that with a different hosting company, so I don't know if there may be some glitches in it over the next week or so when I'll rebuild it on a different with a different company. So we'll see. But today we're going to have a special guest. The Bohemian Celt, is that true?
Yeah, her name is Andrea. She'll be joining us very, very shortly. She goes by the Bohemian Celt.
The Bohemian Celt, okay, and she runs a magazine called, help me out here.
The Morgue at Midnight, virtual magazine.
The Morgue at Midnight, okay. So she runs a magazine called The Morgue at Midnight, the virtual magazine, and that will be in print soon, to my understanding. But what we're going to touch on today is people's birthdays that were born on this day, May the 12th. So before we get into that, I want to tell you that this show plays on many different platforms. We get the majority of our listeners from Spreaker.com. That's where a majority of our listeners come from, but it does go to iTunes, it goes to YouTube. A lot of people like to listen to it from Spreaker because they can download it. So there you go. So let's look at the celebrity birthdays today. Tony Hawk, pro skateboarder. I remember as a kid when me and my cousin used to do the BMX riding. Tony Hawk was somebody that we looked up to, even though he was in the skateboarding community. And he turns 50 today. So if y'all remember, back in the 80s was probably when he had his most fame as a skateboarder. And then after that, he started doing films. Florence Nightingale was born on this day in 1820. Of course, she died in 1910. And Emilio Estevez was born on this day, May 12th. And he is 56 years old. Let's see who else we got here. Kim Fields from the Facts of Life show turns 49 today. So if y'all remember that show back in the 80s. And Katharine Hepburn, even though she died in 2003, she was born on this day in 1907. So that's some of the George Carlin, the famous comedian. He died in 2008, but he was born on this day in 1937. And for all the sports fans out there, Yogi Berra was born on this day in 1925, and he passed away in 2015. And that would be wrap it up for our celebrity birthdays for today.
And today I'm going to bring some sort of important or maybe not important days or events that happened today, May 12th. In 1777, the first ice cream advertisement by Philip Lindsay in the New York Gazette. And in 1792, a toilet that flushes itself at regular intervals is patented. 1870, Manitoba became a province in Canada. 1885 was the Battle of Batoche. Louis Riel and the Métis were defeated, and it was the surrender of Riel. 1928, a lot of you women may not like this, but in 1928, Mussolini's he actually ends women's rights in Italy. And then in 1963, Bob Dylan walks out of the Ed Sullivan Show.
Well, there you go. That's some historical facts for you in the entertainment business. And I don't know about where the people who is listening to us. Hold on, we got our special guest today calling in right now, so let's do this right now. Hello, welcome to the Tickle Trunk of Horrors show. Is this Andrea?
It is.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Are we okay? We was just doing a little bit of talking about the virtual magazine that you have online as a horror fan, and maybe you can let the people out there maybe you could talk to them a little bit about it and what makes your magazine different than other magazines.
Well, that's easy. My magazine is devoted to thanatophiles like myself. Thanatophile is someone who is obsessed with dead things, death, people dying, anything like that. Ghouls is probably the term that most people are used to hearing. If it's anything involving death, the dead, cemeteries, people in the funeral industry, suicidal thoughts, dark prose, hopelessness, I'm all about that. I'll accept drawn art, like if people are artists. I'll also accept photography. I'll accept poems, prose. I am a really big fan of musings. Like if someone just has a dark thought and it's a line or two, that they've drawn something to go with it, or they have a picture that they've taken to go with it, or even if they found something on public domain, because I'm a big fan of showcasing awesome work on public domain as well if people find it there. So I'll accept anything like that.
Yeah, and for the people listening out there, a lot of people don't know what public domain means, but public domain is something that no longer has a copyright. The copyright had expired or was never copyrighted in the first place. There's a lot of films that are actually public domain that any film production company can turn around and re-release, which a lot of people are unaware of that.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of books, too. There's at least one publisher, I can't remember the name of the publishing house, but there's at least one publisher in the horror field that will take old horror books that are now in the public domain and re-release them. So, yeah, if you can utilize public domain, that is a great way to go for people that don't have a lot of money or are just getting started and aren't really sure what to do. I've donated quite a few things to public domain because public domain has helped me over the years.
Oh, yeah. And that's, going into like the other publishing company that you was talking about that keeps the books alive. It's in a way, it's preserving history. It's not letting that history go away.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's very important. I respect digital media because I'm a greenie, I'm an environmental activist, and I hate the thought of killing trees, but I'm also big on recycled paper, too. So while I cherish libraries and think that libraries should be kept open, books should never be thrown away or gotten rid of, I also know that digital has its place too. So I used to be just anti-ebooks when they first came out. I was just like, no, not really. I don't really see the point in them. But I do now. So it's like as long as there is a repository somewhere, whether there's a library or a public domain site, or if there's one day going to be an e-repository for things, as long as history is kept alive, because I'm a big history buff too.
And if you could sort of explain to some of our listeners, where did you come up with the name for your virtual magazine? I think it's really awesome. It's the Morgue at Midnight. Very, very catchy name to me.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've always wanted to be a funeral director. That goes back to me being a thanatophile. I've always, since I graduated high school many years ago, I have wanted to be a funeral director, but I don't have what it takes. I have what is considered an irrational fear of what's in body fluids, things that you can catch if they get in your bloodstream or if they get on you, or just the normal dangers that people that do embalming and morticians have to deal with. And so that knocked me out of the running right there, because in order to be a funeral director, you have to be a mortician. There's no way around that. Unless you just open your own funeral home and hire a mortician, then you can take the title of being funeral director, but you'll have people doing your work for you. Right. Unfortunately, I don't have the money to do something like that. So the morgue at midnight is just kind of my way of living my dream of owning a morgue or a funeral home without having to actually put out the money to do so.
Well, that's a good way of doing it. And like I said, I really, really like the name. And something that I find most fascinating or interesting about you is that you're also an empath like I am, and you are a paranormal investigator. Can you kind of go into, have you been a lifelong empath? Were you born like that, or at what age do you realize that you had that specific ability?
I've always known that I was different, and probably the first inkling that I ever got that how different I was around the age of 5. And that was when in my childhood home, I always felt there was something standing outside our bathroom door. My parents bought a very, very old house. I think it was built in 1905, somewhere around in there. And the man that owned it before my parents bought it, he didn't believe in modern amenities. So he did not have an indoor bathroom. He went to an outhouse. And it wasn't until he died and left the house to some of his relatives that they updated it with a bathroom. To this day, if you go in my mother's bathroom, the back of the chimney from the living room is there in the bathroom.
Oh, wow.
They used to always freak kids out when they would come over to my house when I was growing up. They're like, why is that thing in your bathroom? And I'd always have to say, that's the chimney from the living room. This is a very old house. And so I started realizing when I was a child, when I was in the bathroom, that there was someone standing outside the door. And I grew up in a very, very religious household. Even though my mother's family are country witches, it was still something that was not talked about. It was just the ability to do things, but you didn't talk about it. And so I knew I could not ask my mother what was going on in the house. I didn't ask her until I was probably 15 or 16, somewhere around in there. And I happened to catch her in a good mood one night while we were doing dishes. And that was when I realized, talking to her, that I hadn't been imagining the feeling outside the bathroom door, and that some of the things I hadn't been able to talk about while growing up as a child, I wasn't crazy. I was able to feel these things. And the only thing we can contribute the feeling in the bathroom, because my mother admitted that she also had felt it. Now, my dad never would admit it, but my mother said that he had. He felt the old man as well. It was that feeling that you get when someone's standing outside your door right before they open it and come in. That was the feeling that I grew up with while being in the bathroom. We've attributed it to the old man opening the door and going out to what he perceived was the way to the outhouse.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So you've had, you grew up with that, and it sounds to me like in my family, you have a lot of females that have the same ability as you do. And I think, to me, that's a very unique upbringing, even though that you weren't allowed to maybe say it out loud. But I think that's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I do a lot of work with my empathy. I have to turn it off a lot because I've never tried to control it. I've never tried to make a living off of it or anything like that. So I have to be careful with it. If I'm going somewhere where I think I might be open to feeling things, I have to shut everything off unless I've been asked to tell people what is going on. Like when I did the Great Appalachian Spook Show at the Twin City Opera House, I left myself completely open there. I kept my guard up enough, but I left myself open, and I was going around and pointing everything out. And it was kind of neat. The men that put on the Paranormal Expo, one of them looked at the other one and said, "Have you told her?" And he's like, "I have not told her a thing. Everything she's feeling." "Oh, be careful, Daddy. What's the matter, Mommy's baby? What's the matter, Mommy's baby? You gotta be careful when you're scratching yourself, okay?" My dog. She's a big baby. And he said, "No, she's feeling everything she's feeling, and she is right on the money." So if I know I need to have myself open, I can, but for the most part, I don't just walk around and walk up to people and do strange things like so many of the caricatures and the stereotypes of empaths, that we do. Oh, I see this in your future, or I feel this from you. I don't do anything like that.
Well, that's the way to be, and that's how I am too. And another question I have for you: what made you really decide to do this virtual magazine? Was there a particular incident or something that happened to you that thought, you know what, okay, it's time for a virtual magazine to be able to have a collection of all the things that you described that the Morgue at Midnight was to be about?
Well, as you know, I was an author for quite a long time. I was a best-selling, award-winning author, and best-selling is in brick-and-mortar store. I was a Borders bestseller. Because now in the digital age, people are always saying, oh, okay, well, on Amazon or what? So I always make the distinction that, no, I was an actual bookstore, brick-and-mortar bestseller. And I enjoyed my writing. I really did. I loved my fans. I loved going to conventions and meeting my fans and talking to people. And I also owned 2 magazines at the time, and both were pretty prolific. One was much more so popular than the other, but because one was devoted specifically to poetry and the other one was devoted to anything else. And I retired 8 years ago from writing and swore I would never go back. But as time has passed, I've realized that people that, and I probably should, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I'm still very, very friendly with the people that were involved. But I was involved in a project for a while where I needed to come up with half-hour slot content. And that got to be taxing after a while, and because I'm very good at brief things. I can whip out a 300 to 500 word story in no time. I love dark musings. A lot of times, I guess they would call them notes, side notes, or leaf notes in the spine of the book. Like if you're reading a magazine and there's a little note there in the spine, I'm really excellent with things like that. And I thought, that's strange that there's nothing on the market that will cater to people that just have these little thoughts that just pop in their mind. And people can go on Twitter, but it's like Twitter should not be the only avenue. There should be some venue where people can put these thoughts out there and allow others to read them. And also, I'm a big mental health advocate, and I know that a lot of times people have feelings that they feel that no one else has, and they feel alone. And that's why my magazine is also open to suicidal thought, because I know that a lot of people will contact me and they'll just say, I need someone to talk to, and they'll feel better after they talk to me. So I'm also thinking along the lines of maybe if people can get these dark thoughts, dark musings, dark poetry, dark artwork out of their systems, as it were, that maybe they won't be so depressed and they won't act out the feelings that they have, like doing drugs and getting drunk, because they don't know how else to deal.
Well, let me ask you this now. As a horror fan, like, what would be your favorite horror movie?
My favorite horror movie, probably the 1990 remake of Night of the Living Dead, because I am a huge Tony Todd and Patricia Tallman fan. And I could watch that movie every single day. I think Tony Todd's performance, he deserved an Academy Award. I thought the movie was fabulous. Yeah. I watched that quite a bit.
I have not seen the remake. I've seen the original. I have not seen the remake yet. I'm usually not a big fan of the remakes, but it sounds like that's one worth checking out.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of remakes either, like the new Dawn of the Dead that came out. I absolutely despised that. I just thought that movie was just absolutely wretched, in my opinion. They will never, ever replace the original Dawn of the Dead. That one was just, that was it. I used to watch that movie every day. But Night of the Living Dead, I'm really, really pleased with how well they did it. And like I said, Tony Todd makes the entire movie.
And
he's just incredible.
I had a question for you in regards to your sort of tagline or your other name that you use, the Bohemian Celt or Celt. Could you explain where that came from? The origins. Our listeners are kind of curious on where that came from.
Well, I am a cornucopia of oddities, strange facts, and many facets. I'm the type of person that you can be around and just look at me eventually and say, I can't figure you out. I hear that a lot when people are speaking to me. I can't figure you out. Because I can go from watching videos of people being dismembered while they're still alive and turn right around and jump on a site about bringing clean water to people in third world countries and start signing petitions and retweeting. I can watch a human being devoured by an alligator and turn around and write scathing letters and sign petitions and demand the death of animal abusers. So a gothic hippie, some people have called me, because I'm also an environmentalist. I'm big on recycling. I'm big on saving the planet. So, and it's like someone told me the other day, I was a cheerleader in high school because I was always very, very athletic. I'm a former martial arts champion, former baton twirling champion. I taught gymnastics for a while, and someone looked at me the other day and said, I so totally do not see the cheerleader angle. And I said, most people don't. I can tell you, I was the outcast. I can walk in and out of whatever world I happen to occupy at that moment and right into another one without missing a beat. Some people are one thing or they're another. Like I said, I can watch the remake of Night of the Living Dead and turn right around and get on Instagram or Twitter and start retweeting a bunch of precious little animals and saying, oh my God, look how precious, look at this. And people are just like, they're just enamored with it. And I don't understand it, because to me it's just that's who I am. And the Celt comes from my Celtic heritage. I have quite a bit of Celtic heritage that I'm very proud of.
Well, that's good. And like I said, that's a very unique quality or very unique talent that you can, just kind of slip back and forth in between these worlds and be very, very comfortable. And not too many people can say or have that ability to do that. And, being an empath
that's what
as well.
I've heard, and it's always just kind of made me laugh, because that's how I've always been. That's absolutely how I've always been. I can go online, like I said, and watch videos of people being beheaded, and then turn right around and watch a video of a cute little doggy rolling around on the floor, and people are just like, I don't know how you can do that. I said, well, to me, I don't understand how you can't. But
that's pretty amazing. And I was sort of kind of stuck, maybe as it will, when you're talking about suicidal thoughts on your virtual magazine. Have you ever had somebody say to you that you've actually stopped them from committing suicide because you've offered them an ear or an outlet for them to, really have these thoughts being put out there? Because like you said, a lot of people have no one to talk to, and sometimes just having the ability even to write something out and then just get it out there is a healing process.
It is, and I haven't had anyone tell me that yet, but that's part of the goal. And I also don't want people to feel, because I've always been called a freak and an outcast and a weirdo and a ghoul my entire life. I have a very realistic outlook on death, and I don't think that if you're death positive, or even if you're a bit of a ghoul as I am, you should be punished for that. And there are some people that are made to feel like freaks because they like to watch the beheading videos or the dismemberment videos. Or like me, they want to be a funeral director, and they can't tell anyone that because, oh my God, you want to be a funeral director? That's so creepy. People should not be made to feel strange, inferior, or somehow defective because of how they are. So I'm really hoping that if people have dark thoughts or they just feel down and they need to express them, that they can feel comfortable doing that with the magazine, along with your poetry and your other dark prose and your photography. And like the other day, I took a picture of what was left of a deer on the side of the road. It was just, someone had already taken the skull, but it was a rib cage and some legs, and you could see the fur, and I put that up on the magazine. And I thought, there's probably no telling how many magazines in America, probably none, that would take something like that. Oh, that's disgusting, that's foolish, that's creepy, that poor deer, why would you do that? To me, it was beautiful. And I put something in the little prose I put with it, something about inevitably the circle of life always ends in death. But the circle of, and I stress that the circle of life inevitably will end with death.
And I think that's wise. That's wise, because I mean, no one is going to escape death, and it's a natural occurrence, and it's not an oddity, and people right away get horrified, but I mean, it's a natural part of the cycle.
It is, and I'm sorry that the deer got run over, but if I could have brought the entire skeleton home, I would have and preserved it, because the deer died. Yes, someone ran it over. It was out in the country, so I'm sure someone hit it with a truck or something. And that was sad that the deer died, but okay, you just leave it on the side of the road and let it rot? To me, that's kind of sick. That people just drive by it every single day and no one has stopped and taken a picture or stopped and said, oh, poor deer, I hope you died real quick or something. To me, just ignoring things like that, I consider that kind of depraved.
You know, that's the same thing Alexandria does, but she does it with snakes and frogs and butterflies.
Oh, I have a collection of animal skeletons. I have a dead frog, and my husband bought me a bobcat skull at an estate sale the other day, and I've got roaches, and I've got a dead mouse skeleton, and I've got things like that. And people, when I post pictures, people will say, why do you collect things like that? And my thought would be, why would you want to take something like that and throw it in the garbage? If someone in your family died, would you take them and just throw them in the garbage?
I mean, for me, I agree with you totally, and I think for me, I just feel very comfortable around the idea of death, and it's sort of, in a way, it kind of comforts me. I have my own, I call it my own little mortuary of little individuals that have passed on. Some of them are mummified, because I have a fascination with mummification, but for me it's something that kind of gives me solitude, and it gives me a sense of peace, and also, you know, it's sort of, to me, they're more important than a diamond ring would be to somebody else.
Oh, absolutely. For my husband and I have been married 24 years now, but for our 16th wedding anniversary, he bought me an antique baby's coffin.
Oh, wow.
And he bought it from a reputable dealer.
Mm-hmm.
But the dealer, we didn't question where the dealer got it. When we got it home, it had one of those curtains from the 1970s, the kind that came with like the harpoon hooks stapled into it. And my husband took all that out, and he was cleaning it, and he said, dear, I think someone dug this coffin up at some point. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, the handles have been taken off of it. There was a nameplate off of it. And he said, but there's no way we can find out who it belonged to. And I said, well, then we'll just take care of it for the rest of our lives. So my husband redid it and did a beautiful job. He put green velvet inside it and made a little pillow. And it has a prominent place here in our living room. And I did an interview one time where someone had an absolute fit. They didn't realize that I was in the chat room along with everyone else. and a woman was pitching and said, I don't know how you could have a baby's coffin in your house. That's sick. And I answered her, but I actually answered her over the interview. I said to the lady in the chat room that thinks that I'm a depraved ghoul because I have a used baby's coffin in my house, I said, I'll have you know, we didn't dig the baby up. The man that we bought the coffin from didn't dig the baby up. It's very, very old. He's had it for a while. I said, and I would much rather have the coffin in my house where my husband redid it and did a beautiful job and it has a place of prominence than for someone to use it as a Halloween prop or just stick it in a museum somewhere. I said, in my house, it can be appreciated. And the lady didn't know what to say about that. But I was watching something the other day and they auctioned off an old coffin and it was going to a haunted house. And I was like, really? I mean, that's fine and all, but not for a real coffin. It needs to have more dignity than that.
Let's go into the paranormal side of things for a moment. Like, what, if any, paranormal experiences have you had in your life? What would be the most horrific?
The most horrific to this day was, and this is in my book, A Walk in the Moonlight, I chronicled the strange oddities that I've had happen throughout my life. Probably the creepiest. There's a couple that stick out in my mind as creepy, but to this day, the creepiest is still the cigar bar in St. Augustine, Florida. And that probably will surprise people to hear that, because since I wrote the book, I have been to the Twin City Opera House and the Great Appalachian Spook Show, where I had what has become a legendary fight with one of the malevolent ghosts in the building. It goes back to, I was walking around up above the catwalk, and I just looked over, and I said, someone is watching me. And it turns out, and I looked at the two people hosting it, and they just had their heads down and shaking their heads, and it turns out that was the side that the malevolent ghost lived on. And during the ghost hunt that we had afterward, that they do like paranormal tours, the ghost made it very clear to the people running the tour, his name was Charlie, that I had better not leave the group. I was in extreme danger, and if I got separated from the group, he would kill me. And that just started a back and forth between he and I, and where I challenged him, and it got really heated. And people think that should be the strangest thing that's happened to me, and it's actually not. The cigar bar in St. Augustine, Florida still holds that honor. I went on a ghost tour up there one time, and I told the lady when she started it, I said, I am an empath, and I'm the genuine thing. I'm not this crap you see on TV with all these fakers. And I said, I am the real deal. I said, and if you church up this tour in any way, I will bust you, and I will not think twice about doing so. I said, so keep it real, keep it factual, and keep it real. And so when we went to the cigar bar, we went up to the second story, and I immediately felt just a cold grip. And I looked down the hallway, and I was absolutely just overtaken by a fear of terror, just feeling terror. So I went into the bathroom and looked around for a minute, and I had myself guarded because I could just feel it. The malevolence in that place was unbelievable. And so I came out very calmly, walked down the hallway, and said, no one is to go, men, you're on your own, I'm sorry, ladies, no one is to go to the ladies' room by themselves. You take me with you in case something happens. Well, no one would go. And I stood there in the hallway. The hallway was very narrow. So I stood with my hand, one hand on each wall, and I said, no one is walking past me. If you can go to the bathroom downstairs, go to that one first. And I stood there during the entire tour, and something just crawled up and down my back with a hatred that I find difficult to articulate. I've never felt such terror, but I stood there because I felt it was my obligation to try to protect the group. And once we were leaving and getting ready to go to the next part of the tour, this young man comes running up the stairs. Now, earlier there was a crawl space, and I had opened the door to look in because I'm nosy like that. I opened the door and looked in and slammed the door real quick, and I said, no one is to open that door to that crawl space. And everyone looked at me and they said, right there? I said, yes. I said, you do not open that door. It is to stay closed. And everybody was like, okay, that's fine. This young man comes running up the stairs as we were getting ready to go, and he pointed at me and he said, you. And I thought, what did I do? And he said, you felt it, didn't you? And I said, yeah, I did. He said, there is something up here. And I said, yeah. And I said, especially in that crawl space, there is something. I said, down that hallway. And he said, oh, I won't go down that hallway. He said, but I made the mistake one night of thinking I was going to scare my girlfriend. And he said, so I hid in that crawl space. And he said, there wasn't enough room for anyone but me in there. And he said, so I hid in there waiting for my girlfriend. I was going to have my buddies bring her upstairs, and then I was going to jump out at her and scare her. And he said, while I was in there, he said, I swear to you, something in my ear said, boo. And he said, I ran screaming out of this place.
Oh,
and I
wow.
said, well, there's something in there. I said, and whatever is in there is malevolent. I said, malevolent on a level, it is angry. I said, and what is down the hallway is malevolent. And I said, you could not pay me to stay a night up here. And you certainly couldn't pay me to go in that crawl space.
Oh, wow.
And that, to this day, for something to scare me like that, considering what I've grown up with and what I've experienced on my own, that was when I knew whatever power was in that place was not a joke.
Yeah, that sure doesn't seem like it. I had another question for you, too, in regards to, again, your virtual magazine. I keep going back to that, but I'm just completely fascinated with the idea. What word of advice would you give to an individual that would be kind of leery about submitting maybe some of their darker thoughts, putting pen to paper? Because again, we know it's very therapeutic, but there is a huge fan base for that kind of literature, even if it's just putting 2 or 3 lines to paper. That there is a lot of people that are really inspired by dark musing.
Absolutely, I would tell people, don't be afraid. Feel at home. You've actually found a place now where you will be accepted and you won't be looked down upon for expressing how you really feel.
And I think that to me would be a negative for a lot of people about being frowned upon, being made to think they're a freak, or making them seem like they're maybe even inhuman for expressing. Like even me, I would have loved to be a mortician or work in a funeral home, and one of the things that I would love one day to have in my living room would be a cooling table, a mortuary cooling table as a coffee table. And to me, if I could find one of the old metal ones, I mean, that would be like winning the lottery for me. And other people, like your little child's coffin, would think, well, this lady's off her rocker, she must be a sicko. But to me, that would be an awesome piece that I would love to have in my living room one day.
Yeah, and see, people should not feel badly for having the same kind of affinities that we do. Like, I love my baby's coffin. I've got an antique meat cleaver that an old fan sent me many years ago. I've got a mural painted on my wall of a haunted house on one wall and a cemetery on the other wall. I've got all kinds of strange things around my house, and people walk in and they're like, oh my God, you're a creep. And I'm like, okay, you can leave now, because I'm not a creep. There is nothing wrong. I've got handheld sickles on an antique trunk. I've got all kinds of strange things like that I love, because I've got a spinning wheel. People think, oh, you got a spinning wheel in your house? Yes, I have a spinning wheel. I have old medicine bottles. I've got all kinds of things like that because I love it, and people should not be made to feel like they're weird because they do have it. I had a lady one time with one of my older magazines that I had. She was in the funeral industry, and it took me forever to convince her that, hey, I really would. I would love for you to send me something about the work that you do. She just couldn't believe that, and she wouldn't even use her real name when she sent it in.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, and I would love, I have actively put out there, I would love for anyone that is involved in the funeral industry or involved in antiques, if you get in funeralia, anything like that, I would love to have in the magazine. And so far I haven't had any takers, and that's a shame because my desire is genuine. I really, if people work in a funeral home, or you have a friend that works in a funeral home, or you work in a crematorium, please contact me. I would love to send you some questions, or if you wanted to write an essay about what you deal with, I would love to have things like that. And to me, I think it's inhuman for people to be made that there's something wrong with them because that's the profession they've chosen, or because they actually get enjoyment out of working in an alternative field. To me, crazy is what I did for 30 years in corporate America, sitting behind a desk.
Right. So you've really broken those chains of, day in and day out, and you're actually able to do something that you have a passion for and you have a genuine love for. And I mean, not everybody can say that they can do that, and I think that's awesome. If you're living your own personal dream.
I am now. Yes, it took me 30 years, but I am now. My husband he's a heart patient, so I help take care of him now. And now that I'm retired from the rat race, I can actually do the things that I've always wanted to do. I have to work around my husband, of course, and his needs, but when I was sitting in an office 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, I had no hope of ever doing anything else. I had to earn a paycheck and pay the bills and everything else. Now I can really, really live my dream and help others and make others realize that it's okay. You like to go walk in cemeteries? I grew up walking in cemeteries. My mother and I would go to cemeteries all the time, and people would always say to us, that's so creepy. And my mother is very open, like I am, despite being quite religious the way she's always been. She's very nonchalant and very matter of fact when it comes to death. She's like, why is walking around the cemetery creepy? People die, you bury them, you go and visit them, and if you can pick up a flower or stop by a grave where someone died in 1922 or something like that, and you know they don't have any family left, somebody should care about them. Somebody should go visit them.
That's
and
right.
so I'm the same way. And to me, it's sick that when people die, if you want to remember someone, or even if you don't know them, I don't have to know people. I used to go to the cemetery all the time, and I would sit and I would talk to the gravestones of the people. There was a young man that had died in 1925, and I would just sit there and I'd be like, you were so young. You were only like 25 years old. I wonder what could have killed you. I would love to just have a peek in what your life was like for just a day. And people always thought that was so strange. And it's like, no, what I think is strange is you hanging out at the mall all day. To me, that's strange.
Yeah, that's the way I consider that too. There's people that like to spend all day in window shopping or spending money that they don't have. And to me, I mean, I grew up myself spending any free time that I had in cemeteries because that was the only place that I kind of felt comfortable.
Me too. And the older the cemetery, the better. I've collected gravestone epitaphs since I was probably 15. In fact, I put out a book of my gravestone epitaphs that I had been collecting from the time I was 15 until I was probably around the age of probably 37, 38. So I had quite a few, and I put them all in a book. And, of course, there were the people that were, oh, my gosh, why do you think people would want to read that stuff? I said, okay, the next time you are in a cemetery for any reason, look at the graves. Look at how they're made. Look at what they say. They are all small now. They have just the name and the birth and the death date and maybe a line at the bottom of the stone. I said, the graves that I've collected these epitaphs from were giant, beautiful angels. Some of them were woodmen of the world, which ended in the 1930s. I think probably the oldest, or the last time I saw a woodman of the world gravestone, it was, I think, marked 1931 or 1935. And so you don't see things like that anymore. And the gorgeous gravestones with the full length epitaphs on what looks like a vault with pillars underneath it. I'm like, that's when graves had personality and when people had money to show the appreciation for the lives that people had lived. Now you go to a cemetery, it looks like a golf course.
Yeah,
and I said, to me, that's depressing.
Yeah, that sucks. My granddad's headstone, he wanted to be buried in a cemetery where they did not allow big headstones. And that's the problem with a lot of cemeteries today, is that they do not allow you, a lot of the newer ones, to put the big headstones. And so he ended up with a very small one, which was very disappointing to me.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I've decided when I die to be cremated. Because the beautiful stones, like if you go to the cemetery in Savannah, or you go to the cemetery in New Orleans, or you go to Massachusetts, or places like that that are significantly, historically popular and important, you go to places like that and you see the grandeur that went into these marbles. But now, it would probably cost you $150,000 to get a stone like what you would find in the cemetery in Savannah. And I realize that a lot of work has to go into that, and I realize that it's not just something that they can mass produce. But who's got that kind of money to spend on a gravestone in today's world? I mean, people are lucky in today's world if they can eat and pay their bills.
Well, a friend of mine, he died, last summer, Rich?
Yeah.
A friend of mine died. He was a multi-millionaire. He owns a factory, 5% Nutrition, down in Florida where you're located. And the multi-millionaire, and even he has a small headstone. So that I don't know. The cemeteries are putting too many limitations on what you can and cannot do these days.
They are, and everything is so cost prohibitive, and it breaks my heart because, to me, and that's another reason I wish that I could own my own funeral home, I would bring back the grandeur of someone dying. There would be, I went to a funeral, it was last year, and I walked into the funeral home, and with the exception of a beautiful settee that they had that looked like it was from the late 1800s sitting in the parlor, I walked in and I was like, oh, since when did I start coming back to work? Because that's what this looks like. This looks like an office building. They've got the nice muted lighting. Okay, fine. To me, it didn't look like a funeral home. It looked like an office building. But see, then you've got the people that will say, oh, well, that's because you've got creepy morticians and you've got all these creepy people and the way they look, and, death is creepy enough. We don't want people to think it's creepy. And it's like, so, yes, you've got a nice brick and mortar funeral home. You're able to bring in bodies galore and set them up, and it's like a factory. But where's the personality? I fidgeted the entire time I was in that funeral home, and my husband's like, what is wrong with you? And I said, I cannot stand it in here. I feel like at any minute I should get up and go try to find where the fax machine is, or I need to find where the copier is, or maybe I should go do some filing. I said, this is not a funeral home. This is an office building.
Hey,
and then the hearses have changed the way they look now. They used to be so gorgeous. Now it's like, oh,
Andrea,
you look just like.
We're running out of time,
Yeah.
but what I wanted to ask you is, we think the Morgue at Midnight magazine should be out in print pretty soon, right?
Yes. Yes, it should be. That is still to be determined, the exact date and submissions and things like that. But yes, we are working on that.
Okay, and it was great to have you as a guest. And when this podcast is over, I'll send you the appropriate links.
Excellent. I would appreciate that, and just let me know when I can share the links, if I can do it immediately or what have you. And feel free to have me back on the show anytime, because as you can tell, I can talk about death and the shadow realm and the way I think things should be all day.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you back on the show in the future for sure.
You've been a very
Excellent.
informative, awesome guest. We really appreciate you agreeing to be a guest. And like I said, we certainly will have you on again. Very informative, educational guest. And I thank you again.
Oh, thank you for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.
All right, you have a good day. Talk to you later.
You do the same. All right.
Bye-bye.
So yeah, very informative guest there. The Morgue at Midnight magazine, should be looking for that in print pretty soon, within the next month or two. That's what I'm being told. And so, what did you think of the interview? What did you think of the guest?
She was a very, very informative guest. Somebody that I could have a conversation with hours and hours. Shares a lot of the same interests that I have. I would have loved to be in a mortician myself, working in a funeral home. But like I said, people can have to appreciate that death is nothing to be afraid of or ashamed of, because it certainly does happen to each and every one of us. There really is no escape. But there's certainly not a need for people to ostracize or to make it scary when it really isn't scary, or make it a negative, bad thing. And it really is not. And like I said, it was refreshing to have a guest that could really put it into perspective for a lot of our listeners that may be leery about funeral homes, morticians, or anything like that. That, it's not, you shouldn't be ashamed of the things that you have a passion for.
Well, actually, listening to her talk was a lot like listening to you talk. Y'all share so many similar interests. Collecting carcasses, hanging out in cemeteries. Y'all both do the empaths. So y'all, if y'all would have been in school, going to the same high school, y'all probably would have been great friends, I think.
Well, it's just sharing. People that are empaths, unless you're an empath, we have a lot of emotional challenges, and we have been ostracized or being made to think that we're a freak. So a lot of times we seek solitude, or we seek comfort in places like cemetery, mortuaries, and surrounding ourselves by corpses, when other people kind of make fun of us or deem us as a freak. So a lot of people that are true empaths do indeed share some of the same similar traits in interests.
Yes. So that tobacco shop in Florida, what is it? I know that Dominican cigars are being sold there because they're legal. I don't know if Cuban cigars are legal these days. I know they've been illegal for many, many years. But I think they were about to become legal again over here. It's been, since the 40s since they were allowed over here?
I don't know how it works in America. That I couldn't tell you about Cuban cigars.
Yeah, it's been quite... What about in Canada? Do y'all have Cuban cigars up there?
I think we do. I mean, I think we have a lot of places where you can buy cigars, and I know my older son smokes cigars. I think he's had Cuban cigars, so I don't think they're illegal in Canada. I may stand corrected on that.
Yeah. So, yeah, that was a pretty awesome show. Tomorrow we have, on the 13th of May here on Mother's Day, we actually have the Hell Barbie, Claire Storm, was going to be on the show. And so there you go. That's it's going to be an interesting podcast right there. If you get a chance, look up Claire Storm on the internet, on Facebook. But she does a live show actually tonight on the 12th. Live from the murder house will be Claire Storm's live show at 9:30 p.m. Eastern time. So that should be pretty good. And I guess that's it.
And thanks to everybody for joining us, and thanks for Andrea for joining us. And again, check out her virtual magazine, The Morgue at Midnight, soon to become in paper print form very, very shortly. Stay tuned. We'll keep you in the loop with that. But again, a very informative, educational guest, Andrea, the Bohemian Celt. Thank you for joining us. Again, the virtual magazine is The Morgue at Midnight. If you check that out, currently on Facebook, folks.
So that's it. Have a good one.